They weren't a fit with the royal family, they weren't a fit with Spotify, they didn't fit with the original director for their Netflix soap opera, she wasn't a fit with the journalist from The Cut, he wasn't a fit with his royal roots, they weren't a fit with Netflix, they weren't a fit with their alleged Hollywood connections, they weren't a fit with Hollywood, period. And 5 years later, they couldn't find a place to fit. So doesn't that make them the problem? It all goes back to the story now told for nearly a decade, a prince who had way too many insecurities and vulnerabilities to be exploited, falling prey to someone who didn't care for anything other than making a name for herself and building an empire regardless of all the collateral damage. Vanity Fair got the latest scoop on the 5 years of rejection from Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and their American hustle. Hey everyone and welcome back to Scandalous Media, it's Angela here, and I'm sure you've heard by now, but Vanity Fair's Anna Peel wrote one scathing article about Harry and Meghan, one that has them pissed. Vanity Fair spoke with dozens of people who worked with or lived alongside these two, and guess what? Harry and Meghan declined to be interviewed for the article, so it seems like they knew it was coming. According to recent reports, Harry and Meghan are left bruised and upset, and they're in a bad place right now because of it. The article exposes Meghan's shadiness in her relationship with Harry, how difficult it is to work with both of them, and how they're Montecito's latest villains. As always, there are video chapters available. We're seeing the aftermath of what happens to individuals who originally claimed they wanted privacy and a life of normalcy, but sold out anyone they could, marketing it as dirty laundry on the royal family. And when they finally ran out of things to complain about, they were tasked with showing us what they got. Spoiler, they couldn't deliver. Sad story for them, but funny story for us, so be sure to like and subscribe for more, check us out on podcast format, and follow us on our social media. You guys know we're all about privacy here at Scandalous Media, and by now you've probably heard about DeepSeek, who created AI that rivals ChatGPT's at a fraction of the cost. It's now the #1 app on most app stores, but every conversation you have through their app gets stored on Chinese servers and is subjected to Chinese censorship. If you want to test out DeepSeek's power without sharing all your conversations with Beijing, then let me recommend my sponsor, Venice AI. Venice AI is a generative AI platform that is private and permissionless. They utilize leading open source AI models to deliver text, code, and image generation to your web browser. There's no downloads, no installations of anything. And since DeepSeek made their model open source, the people at Venice AI were able to edit it to keep it private and remove any bias injection or censorship. But it's not just China we need to worry about. ChatGPT literally has the former director of the NSA sitting on their board right now. Do we really think our conversations are private with American AI companies? We also know that these companies program their AIs to only give certain kinds of answers. So I love that Venice AI doesn't spy on you or censor AI. Messages are encrypted and your conversation history is stored only in your browser. If you want to try Venice AI, you don't even need to create an account. You can just go to my link venice.ai/scandalousmedia and start chatting. If you want access to a completely private and censorship-less DeepSeek model and other amazing features, go to venice.ai/scandalousmedia and use code scandalousmedia for 20% off your pro plan. Start using AI the way it should be, completely private, unrestricted, and on your own terms. And now, let's get into this Vanity Fair exposé. Meghan's post-divorce book deal. Let's start off with a bang, shall we? For multiple years, there has been a rumor that Meghan was going to release a big tell-all book. Vanity Fair spoke to a source who knew about the deal, writing, Meghan's team had a conversation with the publishing house to gauge interest in the idea for a potential book. The concept, for which there was no written or formal proposal, was post-divorce. Not a general book on life after marital dissolution, or one about Meghan's past experience. This book might center on a post-Harry divorce, not that there was actually one in the works, just if this prior divorce ever came to be. So basically, Meghan's team went shopping for a book deal, pitching the idea of Meghan's life post-divorce from Harry, and the source made sure to mention that this wasn't a book about life after divorce in general, but specifically after Harry. Obviously, Meghan's team represents Meghan, and therefore they wouldn't do anything without her approval, so I don't believe they went behind her back in any way. After many reports of Harry's permanent hotel room left to the side for him, and all those miserable appearances where he's reduced to nothing more than Meghan's accessory at what is supposed to be their joint events, one can't help but think that she used him this whole time and she's doing what she does best, discarding people once they're done serving their purpose for her. We saw this with all her childhood friends, her own family, more specifically her father, and the other people she used to be friends with, such as Priyanka Chopra. Vanity Fair cites another source with knowledge about the situation saying, if that's true to any degree, she would have been approached and not vice versa. No offer was ever made and no manuscript was produced. After all, there was no divorce. Yet. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video? Vanity Fair reached out to Meghan and Harry. I think that in order to combat this massive story against them, the source claiming that the post-divorce book deal isn't true is someone from Meghan's camp, just like all the sources listed here are. After all, it's not like this article was some smear campaign against Meghan or Harry. It was an investigative article that spoke to dozens of sources who had both positive and negative things to say. So if this source claims that Meghan would be approached about a book deal post-divorce, then I pose the question, what exactly would make people approach Meghan about a post-Harry divorce book? Is she sharing her plans with those behind the scenes, if that's actually her plan? Or are people seeing what we've always seen? Vanity Fair writes that a source familiar with Harry and Meghan says, Meghan's metabolism for campaigns that she can move on from, archetypes, the ephemeral 40x40 mentorship program, the forthcoming lifestyle line and show, the wisp of a possible book about divorce that might never happen, are part of why she's better suited to celebrity outside the palace. The royals don't work like that, the source says. How many years has Kate been talking about early childhood development? Like 11? Now 12? We still haven't really seen anything. This confirms to me that this is one of Meghan's mouthpieces. Why? Well, when you find a random dig at Catherine, just know it's Meghan. She can never handle being in second place and having to walk behind Catherine. She thought she was Meghan the Great. Great at doing what? Who really knows? Good thing Vanity Fair is a respected platform that followed up that paragraph writing, Princess Catherine launched Shaping Up, a campaign focused on increasing public understanding of the crucial importance of the first 5 years of a child's life. It's funny that the source mentions Meghan's 40x40 campaign, which was a big flop and had no impact whatsoever. I mean, the campaign was dropped real quick. I made a video about that back in the day, but even after making that video, I can't even recall what the hell that campaign was about. It was just something Meghan did to celebrate herself, but it's not something that actually made a difference. Like I've always said, Meghan and Harry have to invent foundations, charities, and events because no one wants to partner with them on anything, so they do things that make no sense, but it's something they later bring up as a data point. Failed businesses. There is no $100 million Netflix deal. When Meghan and Harry signed the $100 million deal with Netflix in 2020, people were like, that's an insane risk to take with two people who claim they left the royal family for privacy. Because at the time, that was the story. They just want privacy. Now, I don't have 5 hours to spare to debunk that sad story, but luckily for you, I have a whole Meghan and Harry playlist documenting their lies and hypocrisy since day one, so check it out after you finish watching this video. Also, if you haven't already, give this video a like. But back to the Vanity Fair article, they wrote, according to a representative for Netflix, they said, we don't disclose our financial deals with talent, but I can confirm to you on the record that the $100 million figure is not correct. So it was all fluff. They never got the $100 million, and rightfully so because every single project they tried pitching failed. From Meghan's Netflix show Pearl to Harry's podcast idea of interviewing Trump, Putin, and Zuckerberg on, wait for it, their childhood trauma, but it didn't stop there. It was then how that made them into sociopaths. Because Harry thinks he's a psychologist, I assume. I mean, if I didn't know better, I think Harry and Meghan troll people for a living. But this new information is consistent with what my source told me in 2021 when I exclusively spilled the tea about Harry and Meghan's finances struggle and the illusion of connection 4 years before Vanity Fair's confirmation. At the time, my source told me that they are not doing well with money, they don't pay their staff, and that they're drowning in debt. I exposed more about Meghan's 40x40 campaign, so I'll link my post in the description box. In a different post from January 2021, I wrote, my source tells me that their Netflix deal isn't exactly paying them all that much. The whole $100 million deal is a budget for them to pitch ideas and for them to produce. If Netflix loves the idea, great, they'll air it. If Netflix hates the idea, then they will tell them to go back to the drawing board and Netflix will take the money out of the $100 million to make up for the failure. At the time, my source told me, basically, they're not getting paid $100 million. They're really getting a small fee just to put out content for Netflix. When I said Netflix will take the money out of the $100 million, that is if any of their ideas fail. The budget covers basically anything Meghan and Harry put out, anything that flops, so it's like trial and error. Definitely check out scandalousmedia for inside tea because as you guys can tell, our information ages gracefully because it gets confirmed with time. I think Meghan and Harry can learn a thing or two from us about being honest and delivering things that would withstand the test of time. Spotify was a big flop. Moving on to their Spotify deal, Vanity Fair quotes a former Spotify employee who said they had this idea to do a podcast because they knew celebrities did them. They didn't do what celebrities do on podcasts, which is turn on the mic and talk. They wanted a big theme that would explain the world, but they had no ideas. Basically, they wanted something that would give them applause and money and validate them for leaving the royal family, and it failed, and they blamed everyone else around them. Let's not even start with the mess that was Archetypes, a podcast that was originally supposed to include Harry, but yet it was Meghan who made it out of the drawing board with an overly produced podcast with interviews edited to make it seem like she was talking to expert guests, but it was exposed that it was actually the producers talking to expert guests, and Meghan only spoke to the celebrities. I explained all that and more in my video titled The Problem with Archetypes, so check it out for more information. In all fairness, at least Meghan knows how to execute an idea. As horrible as that idea is, at least it's something, unlike Harry who plays the role of a martyr for a living. A source who worked closely with Harry's idea for the Sociopath podcast, yes, that's what they called it, recalled Harry saying, "I have very bad childhood trauma, obviously. My mother was essentially murdered. What is it about me that didn't make me one of these bad guys?" That's not what happened, but okay. And who told you weren't a bad guy, Harry? You sold out your family for a living. You backstabbed everyone who trusted you. You betrayed yourself in the process. So I guess the only thing that differs between Harry and the quote-unquote sociopaths is that they actually got something done, regardless of how bad or good people will label them as. The worst person is the one who thinks they're a victim when they're actually a villain. I think deep down, Meghan knows she's not a great person. She knows that she uses people and discards them. I know that she knows she's fulfilling her own selfish agenda at the end of the day. With Harry, it seems like he genuinely believes that he's doing good, and that's the most dangerous of all. It's the nice guy who can't stop telling you how much of a nice guy he is. But if it makes you laugh, Harry couldn't come up with a podcast idea, and when he came to the LA office one day, he asked for a cup of cocoa. I mean, who asks for cocoa at an office, but okay. Anyway, there was none in the office and the employees scrambled to get some. Then he was pitched an idea about reviewing hot chocolate every week while chatting with a friend.
Seriously?
It was an idea that he and his team both considered and then rejected. That's how down in the gutter Spotify was, considering they signed a deal with someone who is essentially untalented. They pitched reviewing hot chocolate. The jokes write themselves. Another pitched idea was Harry fixing something every week, ranging from a flat tire to global warming. Well, that's quite the range. Imagine living in a world where it was Prince Harry, one with no degree let alone a background in the environment, was who fixed global warming. I wouldn't even trust a world with that. I'd assume that Earth would shrivel up the next day and explode, but I digress. A former Spotify employee revealed that Harry wanted to do a podcast about disabled people who compete in the Invictus Games, but there is no crossover between the audience who would listen to that and the people who want to hear about Harry's life. The former Spotify employee says it was challenging to engage Harry, and a person who interviewed for the job with them said, "I just felt like he kind of didn't want to be there doing that at this time. My expectation was charming receiving line, and it was clear he wasn't that person, at least that day." During the interview, the potential employee said that Harry's attitude was either, "Well, why should I do this?" or "Why are we doing this?" And the interviewee says they wondered, "Didn't Spotify pay you a lot of money to do this?" The person inside Harry and Meghan's circle said, "He looks like the kind of guy who would frankly happily work for charities for the rest of his life and would be very happy if Meghan made all the money and he didn't need to." Another person who worked with Harry on his book tour said that he had great manners and he was very kind and very friendly. Now, what was hilarious was that Vanity Fair revealed that the idea for Archetypes came from another employee, not Meghan, and that worked for them because the employee didn't own any of the intellectual property. If you had the unfortunate luck of listening to Archetypes as I did, you'd quickly realize that this didn't seem like an idea that came easily for Meghan. It felt forced and painful to get through, but she tried to market it as something that is near and dear to her, taking back her life from words that she's been labeled as. Meanwhile, it wasn't her idea to begin with. But it gets worse. The production of Archetypes was initially expected to be handled by Archwell, but the process took longer than anticipated. As a result, Spotify studio Gimlet was brought in to assist with the production. This required Spotify to allocate additional resources and entail extra costs. A current Spotify employee disputes that this extra support was a significant burden, but the majority of the Gimlet team was laid off in the following year, and even though employees attribute this to mismanagement within Spotify rather than any specific project, it's hard to ignore the obvious that Harry and Meghan's slowness and laziness required the efforts of something else that had to be sacrificed in the year that followed. The former Spotify source said, "Archetypes was complicated as a podcast concept. You had to explain what the archetype was, then why the woman embodied it, but also how it wasn't true about her. Every episode was like, this is my friend who has been called that archetype, but is not that archetype." Even worse, they imply that Meghan gave off the vibe that she was close and well connected to these celebrity guests, so she would have the influence to call them personally and they would die to come on the show, but they quickly realized that that wasn't the case as people like Beyonce and Taylor Swift declined to come on the show. So essentially, she sold a fake idea that she was well connected to these people, and then when it was time to deliver, she couldn't, and it ended up with Spotify scrambling to book guests who were willing to come on and employees getting yelled at as she kept changing her mind. Meghan's approach to media projects was often inconsistent, according to a source. She would initially agree to provocative ideas, only to later scale them back. For example, in one episode, she wanted to use the word bitch, because as the source recalls her saying, "You hear it all the time." However, she ultimately settled for referring to it as the B word.
I can't. I mean, for a person who hates the word so much, this is giving me hives.
In that episode, which I listened to, she made a big deal about saying the word, saying something along the lines of it didn't even feel right for her to say it, because she was trying to give that classy and elegant approach. So it's hilarious to find out that that was actually an act, one where she poses as an elegant royal, even though she was going to say the word, initially. Nothing wrong with saying the word, but the issue that Meghan keeps running into is that she's trying to be someone she's not. Another episode, originally titled Slut, was intended to explore how trans women's sexuality is used against them, but Meghan retitled it Human Being and required a complete overhaul of the content late in production. The source notes that this pattern of toning down content was a reoccurring issue. Every episode got more and more watered down and further away from actual conversation, saying that the end result felt like Women's and Gender Studies 101 taught in 2003. Like the Netflix deal, it seems like Harry and Meghan didn't get the $20 million from Spotify, with a source explaining that deals are generally not paid out in lump sums. In other words, the couple would not likely have received the full amount without meeting benchmarks beyond making one 12-episode season of a podcast. Meghan, always the nightmare. It's sad that every single source and outlet has their own niche story of how Meghan Markle is a horrible bully. I went into detail about what The Hollywood Reporter exposed about Meghan, as well as what the Daily Beast exposed, and the birth of the bullying allegations in the palace in my deep dive on Meghan being a bully, so definitely check it out. And now, we add Vanity Fair as another source in the never-ending list about Meghan's bullying. As we already established, Meghan and Harry are unprofessional. They came to the table with no ideas and waited for everyone to make it happen for them. And now, those who worked with Meghan followed in her footsteps to berate employees for a boss who doesn't know what she wants. Terry Wood, an executive vice president at Oprah Winfrey's Harpo Productions, was brought on board to support Meghan. Meghan would later refer to Terry as her right hand when Archetypes won a People's Choice Award in 2022. However, according to a source familiar with the production of Archetypes, the source describes Terry's anger, saying that she yelled at Spotify staffers when Meghan changed her mind about episodes. Vanity Fair states that Terry Wood did not respond to their request for comment. Vanity Fair writes that the source who worked in media projects says Meghan's own relationships with employees tended to follow a familiar pattern. According to someone who worked with her on media projects, Meghan would often start out being warm and friendly, making everyone feel like they were part of a team. However, when things didn't go as planned, Meghan would become cold and distant towards the person she thought was responsible. When something would oftentimes go poorly, it was because of Harry and Meghan's demands, like the teaser for Archetypes being released 5 months before the show even premiered, and yet she blamed everyone else around her. The source describes this behavior as really awful, very painful, because she's constantly playing checkers. I'm not even going to say chess, but she's just very aware of where everybody is on her board, and when you are not in, you are to be thrown to the wolves at any given moment. This would often manifest as undermining. It's talking behind your back. It's gnawing at your sense of self, really, like Mean Girl's teenager. Not everyone had a bad experience with Meghan though. Jane Marie, their producer, said, "She's just a lovely, genuine person." It's interesting how for every 10 horrible experiences someone has with Meghan, there's always a random person on their payroll saying, "She's lovely," and that's where they leave it at. We saw this in the Sad Us Weekly rebuttal, which I also went over in my video. And as I've always said, Meghan projects onto everyone else. She claimed everyone was mean to her and iced her out in the royal family, but really that's what she does. She claimed on Netflix that I wasn't just
being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
Which is essentially the same thing, but that's what she does to her own staff. Vanity Fair writes that someone who worked with Meghan on media projects used to read stories about her bullying palace aides and couldn't believe it was true. But after working with her, they realized that this kind of behavior was actually pretty common, saying, "Oh, on any given Tuesday, this happened." That is insane, and it's not normal in the slightest. Even though Vanity Fair writes that it's hard to believe that Meghan shouted at a palace aide as reported, a person who interacted with her professionally says, "You can be yelled at even if somebody doesn't raise their voice. It's funny that people don't differentiate between the energy of being yelled at and literally somebody screaming at you." We should stop giving Meghan the benefit of the doubt, honestly. Analyze her for 2 seconds and you'll see that nothing is hard to believe. From her anger when Harry talks as she cuts him off, or that time her mother dared to speak, nothing about Meghan screams genuine human being, and you don't need a source to tell you that. However, 2 sources said that someone who worked on archetypes took a leave of absence after working on just 3 episodes and eventually left their job altogether. Others described taking long breaks from work to escape scrutiny and seeking therapy after working with Meghan. The source continued saying, "I think if Meghan acknowledged her own shortcomings or personal contributions to situations rather than staying trapped in a victim narrative, her perception might be better." Harry, the royal rebel without a cause. Vanity Fair reflects on Harry, saying that his decision to write a tell-all book about his family has likely damaged his relationships with them beyond repair. At an event in 2023, Harry expressed hope that he would hear from his family again, but a source believed he hadn't fully grasped the consequences of his actions.
2 years older than me, Willie was the heir, whereas I was the spare.
Spare, or the Monmouth as I like to call it, accuses members of the royal family of briefing the press against him, which has led to Harry becoming embroiled in multiple lawsuits, including one over state police protection for him and his family when they are in the UK.
I was brought into the world in case something happened to Willie. I was summoned to provide backup, distraction, diversion, and, if necessary, a spare pot. Kidney perhaps, blood transfusion, speck of bone marrow.
Funny enough, all Harry and Meghan do nowadays is brief the press. As we saw in my last video about their publicity stunts at the LA wildfires, they couldn't help themselves from even disclosing everything they donated. A source who worked with Meghan described Harry as being socially marooned, saying that Meghan was upfront about the fact that Harry hadn't made any friends yet. I can only imagine the passive-aggressive way Meghan spoke about Harry. Yeah, he doesn't have much to offer, so he hasn't made any friends, and he's relying on me to do everything, so I do my best, because I care about everyone in Africa like Diane. The source elaborates on Harry saying, "I think Harry doesn't know what he wants because he grew up in a fishbowl, and so he doesn't know what real life really is. I think he probably wants to be left alone and be able to go kiss babies every once in a while, but not have to worry about money. I don't think he wants to be famous the way Meghan wants to be famous." Deeply in love or deeply screwed? After that whole tangent, Vanity Fair came to one conclusion, and that is all the sources they've spoken to can agree on one thing. Harry and Meghan still have the hots for each other.
What?
They cite a source who said, "They are so hot for each other, like how you meet those couples where you're like, the way they're looking at each other, I should probably not be here right now."
Oh.
Good for them if that's the case. Unfortunately, we don't see 1% of that in public events. Instead, their hotness for each other is tainted by eye rolls, deep breaths, talking over each other, and the quest for control. I wonder who the source is because it's someone inside their circle who also brings up Diana, and we already know Meghan and Harry's obsession with having a life that parallels Diana. The source said that when Harry is solo, he's very personable. He's very at ease with people, quite like Diana. He just has this way of making people feel very comfortable. When he's in public with Meghan, there is a circus. He's so protective of her because people are so nasty to her. It's a whole different experience. Seems like Meghan is the common denominator. Things get crazy when she's involved. I feel bad for Harry when it comes to his paranoia about Meghan's safety because it feels like Meghan is taking advantage of Harry's trauma. As we know and as exposed about Meghan, she calls the paparazzi. She makes a big fuss when there is no fuss.
Has Meghan tipped off photographers since she's been with Harry?
I'm gonna have to say no comment.
Yeah.
No comment? Well, that's not a no.
We watched on Netflix as she pretended to have a panic attack on the premise of someone chasing them. There wasn't anyone, and the cameras caught as she stared at Harry in this evil demonic look as he started spiraling. Or the fake New York car chase, which was so pathetic. Considering their knack for legal action, it's telling that they took no legal action then. Every time I drive on the FDR, I laugh at how impossible it is to be chased in New York out of all places. We New Yorkers dream of getting to a destination in under an hour, let alone a high-speed chase. But I feel like Meghan likes to make Harry believe that he is this masculine force that must protect her, to take away from the fact that she's the dominant force in every other aspect of her life. The source who worked closely with them says that Meghan's role in their dynamic is caregiver and facilitator. She's the one who makes things happen. Pre-Meghan, Harry would just pop into the palace press office, ask a few questions, and leave, like he was a little bored but also very keen. I can picture him meeting Meghan and being a deep breath of like, I've been so exhausted and you make everything so easy. I don't want to be like, oh, it's an Oedipus thing or whatever, but it kind of feels like she's reparenting him in a way. For years, that's the vibe Harry and Meghan gave everyone. So is it that they're deeply in love, or is he deeply screwed? Montecito villains. Montecito is known for being a quiet place for A-listers where no one would ever bother a famous person. But Meghan and Harry have become Montecito villains. Vanity Fair writes that some people in Montecito are not happy about the attention they're bringing to the area. They think that their presence is driving up housing prices and changing the character of the town. Some people are criticizing Meghan for trying to monetize everything she does, including her new lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard. The brand has a logo that looks like a royal crest, and some people think it's hucksterism, trying to make money by using fake or misleading claims. One resident said that the Sussex say they want to be left alone, but they're always trying to get the attention from the press. A cultural critic named Louis said that this is a common criticism of Meghan, that she wants to pick and choose which parts of fame she likes without accepting the downsides. As Louis says, all celebrities do this, trying to control their public image and pick which parts of fame they like. But some people think that Meghan is being hypocritical by saying she wants privacy while also seeking out attention from the press. I think they don't know what change the world means, says the person who worked in media projects. They want to be people who are looked at as people who want to change the world. Diana walked amongst landmines. Meghan couldn't even say the word slut, says the source. And that's how the cover story ended. That was a lot, but boy did it expose and confirm a lot. You can see the downfall from 2017 when Meghan ran to Vanity Fair to dish about her relationship with Harry, saying, "We're in love, this time is for us, it's part of what makes it so special, that it's just ours, but we're happy. Personally, I love a great love story." To now, the same outlet diving deep into this love story from hell. It's funny, she complained about how Vanity Fair portrayed her then, the same way she complained about the cut to Variety, and just as we started this video with the theme of everyone else being the problem except Meghan, we realized that it is ultimately Meghan who's the problem. And Harry, of course, the martyr victim who's actually just a villain when you think about it. And that villain just won his case in court, but it's not really a win more than it is an admission of defeat and hypocrisy. So if you want me to cover that in a video, let me know in the comments down below. Well, that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Don't forget to follow us on our social media, check out scandalousmedia, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts because you can now listen to us in podcast form, and we have a special surprise bubbling soon. Be sure to like and subscribe for more, and as always, I'll see you next time.